see if you have the strength to finish what you started.
One of the great things about having the last two games is that it gives us a lot of confidence, a lot of knowledge about what works. And so we can take that and we can start to push forward into new places. This is really the first one where we have two Spider-Men in the game at the same time. And so allowing them to have those divergent abilities that are a little bit different, that you have to know what you're getting into with each one, that you can solve different problems a little bit differently in combat, goes a long way towards what we can do. Both characters have a really strong arc, and we invest a lot into
sitting on this fucking throne ass shit.
Both characters have a...
It looks like fucking Kratos and Thraven. Well, I don't know what the villain of this game's name is, but that name, Kraven. Yes, it looks like Kratos and Kraven hunted down the animal so they could. The fuck does nigga think he doing, bro? Get off that chair.
Really strong arc, and we invest a lot into their story for each of them. And so I think, you know, playing the game, you'll definitely see that each of them is in the right place. They have their own abilities. We present opportunities to the player to leverage their unique abilities as you go through each of those missions. And you know, I think that it always ends up feeling like the right Spider-Man for the mission.
You're not getting away that easy.
I think there's still always that struggle for some of the characters. I mean, you can't have Spider-Man without him trying to balance between his personal life and his spider life. And so, you know, I think for Peter, you know, he's in a position where he's trying to find a way. You know, he basically lost his job at the end of end of the first game, right, when Otto's lab shut down, and so he's trying to find how to move forward, how to move forward after May's death, and how to, you know, kind of put his life back together, you know, on the
nigga went on a whole vacation trip. What you mean? Now he's trying to figure out how to balance out people's death.
Forward to some of those things. On the Miles side,
aunt died, and he went
he's just about to graduate from high school, and he's got to figure out what he's going to do. And he's got this Spider-Man thing that's a growing part of his life, but what is he going to do with the rest of it? And so, how he interacts and how he makes choices there, what he's trying to figure out, you know, the next phase of his life looks like. Not just with Spider-Man, but as Miles Morales, and what that means for him. And you know, he's got his family around, he's got his friends around, and how they, you know, interact with him and play with that.
I'm just here to save my friend.
I don't want to get too much into, you know, like where we end up going with Venom for the most part, but I will say that it was really important for us to tell the right story for how the symbiote impacts Peter's life. You know, we obviously show early or at the end of the first game and hear that there's some connection with the symbiote and Harry and how they're trying to heal his sickness. And so what we really wanted to focus on was making sure that it felt like how the symbiote was interacting with Peter, what that took him on, and the journey that he had to go through, and how that symbiote brings something out in him.
What's the
maybe he hadn't exposed or hadn't really thought about much. And so for us, what we
Venom can't be Eddie.
We let that drive our choices.
Eddie, but at the same time, there's a church.
You know,
so Venom might be Eddie.
You know, Eddie Brock is a fantastic character, you know, and everything. But for us, it was really about figuring out how the symbiote and Peter interacted and how that impacted his life, and making sure to keep focused on that element. Having things like the symbiote abilities for Peter that kind of come in, that you can use strategically, that you can use as kind of a power move that didn't exist in the previous game, is a way that we can really allow players to express themselves, to have solutions to problems that, you know, might have existed in the last game that they didn't have good solutions for and had to use just base systems. So they can express themselves in a lot of new ways. Some other things that we really look for by introducing the parry mechanic and that defensive mechanic, we were able to really leverage that. It was really amazing to see what that did for our boss fights. So if you played the game today, you got a little taste of what the lizard fight might look like, and being able to have that one-on-one fight and have them force you to pay attention, to read the fight, to understand what the boss is doing, and to know which defensive move you have to use at the time, to know when to use your offensive moves.
Like
and the
this
fact
game
that
is
they can, every one of our bosses can respond to all of those abilities that the players have. Means that you're getting a better fight, you're getting a deeper fight, a more mechanically sound fight.
But I do like that. I do like the fact that they even have the one-on-one fight.
Have those intimate fights that are really climatic. They still have great narrative.
They did it with like Doc Ock, but it wasn't like I got
just the mechanics and the gameplay of it also is
I had
really
certain objectives and I got to hit him when I was free. This one, deadass get to like fight him, so I put them there.
And then traversal, you know, it's just adding things like the gliding with the web wings, adding things like the slingshot, and just making sure that those all integrate together. And again, just building and giving players new things. And so one of the things that we do in this game is, you know, we doubled the size of the city. So we've now got Brooklyn and Queens there, right? But Brooklyn and Queens they're not built like Manhattan is. You know, they're a lot lower. They've got a lot more trees, a lot of things like that. And then you've got the river in between. And we say, well, how do you traverse all of that? You know, you can just swing, but it doesn't always work. It's not always the optimal way to do it. And so having the opportunity to bring in the web wings, bring in the slingshot, and give you a sense of, oh, I can traverse different. There's a different personality to my traversal as I go around the city and go around the different places, and have that experience is something that is really new and really interesting and gives each of those two new boroughs kind of a new feel to how you experience it while still being Spider-Man. Everything we do here builds on each other and makes our next game better. And so, you know, we had a lot of streaming stuff and everything from building open world games, and then we go into Ratchet, and all of a sudden we're like, well, now we want to just jump instantly, right? And so you get those things, you hit the crystal, you jump from world to world, and we want to drop and reload the next thing and figure out how the mechanics of all of that. And so you get into, then we say, well, how can we use that? How can we use that in the next game? And so when we came into it and we looked at what the team was doing on Ratchet and we looked at what we could do in this game, we said, well, they can jump, we can jump. You know, we've got all this technology. And so just moving it forward in that way definitely inspired us and allowed us to keep building. We've built so much new tech to take advantage of the PS5 and the ability to just stream so much in, that like our long views in this game are such a level up over what they were in the previous game. Because we put so much effort into tech for those views, for what those distant buildings look like, for adding new LEDs of those distant buildings, for making sure that our skyboxes and our atmospheres look fantastic, that we doubled the size of the city and still had to keep everything in memory and still had to make it so that when you fast travel, we can load where you're gonna be in just instantly in under a second as you go in there. We've got our distant building system, which is our imposter system that we draw, and that's been upgraded to have new LEDs and things that we stream in. That's again the PS5 allowing us to swap that stuff out on the fly. We've done a bunch of work in terms of lighting. Our lighting engine has gotten a lot of passes and changes. We've done a lot of work on what our street lighting looks like and how that works and what the material responses are. We've gotten a better handle on ray tracing and more things being able to be ray traced and supported. We've got new things with our skyboxes in this game look ridiculous, and the way that our sky renders and the way that the light comes through in that, and the work that they've done to make sure that our open world looks really amazing at all times of day that
already understands Peter's weakness is sound.
And so,
enemies might
we've got additional things with what we've done with foliage, what we've done with just the way that we leverage, Houdini and procedural generation to get our ground planes and stuff looking great. So there's just
like they have to utilize that
when
they're fighting you.
How our characters look, how everything else looks that come into play to bring it together and make it really look next gen. And I feel like even looking at the remastered game, when we've played, when I've been playing Spider-Man 2 for so long, and I go back and look at some of the old games, I'm like, I don't realize how much of a jump it is until you see it next to each other. When you really A/B test it, you're like, wow, this is a huge jump in terms of fidelity, in terms of execution, in terms of just how
this shit
clean
be good shit,
looks.
Insomniac, good shit.
Beautiful creature.
I got you. It's using this satellite network to track his targets. Oh, you're not getting away that easy.
For us, this is really a culmination of everything we've learned about developing for this console. We did Spider-Man Remastered, Miles Morales, and Ratchet & Clank, and so as our fourth title for the PS5, We've really gotten to
Bro, the fact that they're
leverage
about to make
everything we've seen in developing those
Wolverine
games.
with all this like
Our performance
experience and
mode for
knowledge.
this title has
it's
ray
about to go
tracing on by default.
I mean, Wolverine's
We've
gonna
really
be a different
expanded
game,
that
obviously.
ray
Like,
tracing,
you don't
ray trace
like
reflections
web
throughout the
swing in
game.
Wolverine
It's
like
on the
you're doing
water
this.
and the oceans, and really
Nor
gives
do you
more realistic
jump
picture
through rifts in
everywhere.
Wolverine like you
We
do
of
in
course
Ratchet
use
Clank.
the SSD and the
But, like,
storage
still, shit like,
solution on the console to really even more
graphic
effect
power, fidelity,
gameplay-wise. You know, the first couple Spider-Man
frame
games,
rate,
we really used it to get rid of the loading
ray
screens.
tracing,
But now
like,
you see it getting used to
technical shit
offer
like that,
faster traversal
that,
through
like,
the
is gonna
world.
look
When you
top
come off
tier.
those slingshots in the open world, I think you're going about
Combat,
3 times as fast as we could in the
story.
first game. I mean, on top of that, we have characters that are more detailed and lifelike that help us tell better, more nuanced stories.
We also have the DualSense with the haptics, and that adds a layer of immersion that is really awesome that we get to play with. So you saw in our demo in the particle accelerator having to hit that sweet spot. In addition, all of our cool audio technology, 3D audio, so you get to hear iconic Tony Todd Venom. It's spooky. It's really like the first time we heard that performance was really something really great.
Yeah.
How we decide to render things
do you
is we like to
think?
have our resolution be dynamic, and then we have a pretty robust temporal anti-aliasing solution that lets us scale that up and down, do different dithering effects with materials and things in the scene. And what that means is we get to take the player's preference about how they want to play the game, and also make sure we use all the features of their display in the console as well. So whether you like playing at 60 frames per second or 30 or 40, if you have a 120 hertz TV, we really get to tailor everything to best utilize that. For those titles, we had fidelity mode, which had which was like the full 4K and ray trace reflections, and then we had a performance mode, which turned the ray tracing off and rendered at a lower resolution. And then we were able to add, I think around launch, if not just after, the performance RT mode, as we called it, which was trying to be the best of both. And for this game, we were really able to deliver that as a baseline performance mode. There's no mode of this game that has the ray tracing turned off because there's no need for it. And we've really figured out how to deliver what we feel like is the right Spider-Man picture and visuals.
Okay.
We want to make sure every player is seeing
That's
that.
calm. That's calm.
I think in this
Calm
demo
as fuck.
here, there's one cinematic where Miles and his mother are having a conversation before you go off and do some Spider-Man stuff. And Bobby, our animation director, was pointing out that there's not a lot of dialogue in that scene. So much of that story is told from their faces and the way they're emoting and reacting to things from each other. And that's really new for us in this game, that we've been able to do that. You know, we're scanning faces with more fidelity, and we've built out more of our processing pipelines to handle that in more detail. Certainly our models are more dense than they have been in the past. And there's some scenes in this game that have 4, 5, 6 main characters on the screen at the same time. That's really challenging for my team to optimize and get running in frames sometimes, but it really opens us up to tell more complex stories with these characters.
Here to pick up a serum order for a Dr. Connors?
We have a whole team of folks who, especially in those cinematics, are very carefully constructing lighting rigs, you know, to light the characters from the right way for every individual shot. If you could see it without the camera changing, you'd be surprised at how much changes between every shot to get it just right, just right. You know, we definitely expanded on it from a tech point of view. Certainly in the demo, you saw Craven, who has a luscious, hairy in a bunch of ways. But it's, you know, more affected by physics and wind and feels a lot more cohesive. I think MJ's hair, as you've seen, is some
And that's
down.
when Miguel's down
Hair's
is the
down.
weakness.
Jealous
is-
of his hair.
not to be
Push them
understated
to the
from a
bell.
challenge point of view. I think
Oh.
in games you so often see female protagonists and characters with hair that's up because that's way easier to
Way
animate and
easier
deal
to
with.
animate and deal
And
with.
so to have it low and over the shoulders and need to behave correctly as she turns her head and all that was a challenge, but I think it was a fun challenge. You know?
You sort of have your tried and true skyscrapers in
that's
Manhattan.
pretty
Once
fresh,
you
though.
get to cross
These niggas
the
like
river,
that got
which
to
is
explore,
experience on its own, hopefully use
the
the web wings to do
progression
that and experience the
from
speed
you
at which you
being
can do
a
that. You get over
developer,
to
I don't
our
know.
Spider-Man stomping ground, so you get
'Cause
to
I like
visit,
shit like
you know,
that.
Aunt May's house.
I like when you're able to
explore
look back on
in
the beginning and be
Queens
like,
get
yeah, I
that
really
more
started
sort of
here and now I'm
neighborhood feel.
here.
And it's lush trees, and then
and like not in terms of like
Brooklyn, you get Brooklyn Visions,
do,
and
more
Miles
so
is sort of like high school stomping ground, and that really comes across in some of the activities and the adventures you can have in these neighborhoods.
It's cool. Queens has a very residential feel to it that's a little different from parts of Manhattan. Brooklyn has its own landmarks. Of course, we're excited for players who know Brooklyn or familiar with the area to find unique buildings that they recognize from our New York.
The great thing in this story is we sort of have these established characters. You know both of our Spider-Men. You hopefully love them. And they're at different points in their lives. Miles is, facing what does he do after he graduates high school, and what is the next step in his life as becoming an adult and what he wants to pursue.
Super stressed about my college essay. Pete's busy doing other stuff.
For Peter, right, he's struggling after the passing of Aunt May and how to constantly balance those duties of paying the bills and being a Spider-Man. And once we add in the symbiote and Kraven showing up into this story, we really get to experience the way in which those challenges really manifest and affect our Spider-Man. So hopefully when you played, you saw how the black suit is maybe affecting our normally quite wholesome Peter Parker, and you got to experience how Miles is able to approach the conflict in his life right now, and maybe not having as much confidence about knowing what he's doing next. I'm blown away by some of the way we were able to bring the symbiote to life. The symbiote powers that Peter has in the black suit have a very visceral and powerful feel to them, both visually and while you're playing. I think that experience is going to sort of put you in the shoes of, do you want to take that black suit off, or do you want to sort of give in to that power?
The process of understanding what the symbiote would look like and how it would behave pretty much took the entire development of the game, I think. Because it impacts everything else. If you make it look too watery, well then Venom's kind of weak. If you make it too solid, then he's like a weird octopus. And it needs to be gooey, and we don't have ways to animate these crazy ways that this substance might behave throughout the game. So it really went from animation tools, animation techniques, material treatments from a technical art team, how environment was laying things out, and it's really just super multidisciplinary to bring it into a cohesive whole.
Are you kidding me, Connors?
Well, I think we know we have a really strong foundation from the first couple games, and we're not trying to change for change's sake. There's a lot that people love about these games that make them Spider-Man games. It's about understanding what that is, and then ways to try something different and make it new. And as you add new things, you got to make sure they fit together in the right way.
And I think our team is also normally very excited at the opportunity to continue to innovate. I think, we want to satisfy people, make sure they're happy with their experience. We're not straying too far from something that they know and love, but we want to surprise them, and we want to give them new toys.
Of course,
so in a lot of ways, it's almost like, what would be cool? Could we add something like this or something like that? And we also have, an open and collaborative team, and I think that goes a long way into some of the best ideas come from the most unexpected place on the team, and you end up with these really delightful moments that bring that sort of fresh perspective and change to something like the third game in a series.
Hopefully you got a sense with the web wings how it's not about, okay, we have wings now and that's the new mechanic. It's about how do they fit with swinging? How do they add to each other to create, new fun ways of going around the city and really build up even what was great about the first game, or the first two games, as you're adding something new. I'm just excited for people to play, and I hope they have a great time. A lot of care and love and effort went into this game from a whole lot of people who've been working really hard on it, and I'm just excited to see all of that realized for players.
We love seeing the reactions of
it's crazy that they never talked about JoJo and the
we want people to have a great time. So every time we release anything, it really does give us good energy to hear people's thoughts and feelings and excitement.
That's double the
it
fucking
really does keep us going.
city damage.
So I hope everyone is satisfied and they loved what we did.
I think that's all the videos. Hey, y'all already know the vibe, you know what I'm saying? Like, subscribe. Don't fucking make me tell you again, bro. Do that shit.